Hello there, you awakening wonders. Thank you for joining me for Stay Free with Russell Brand. In addition to a fantastic guest, we'll be taking a deeper look, a forensic look, in fact, in one of the stories behind the news in our item. Here's the news. No, here's the effing news. But I've got a very, very exciting guest to present to you today. The Oscar-winning director behind Platoon, JFK, and Snowden, a documentary maker who spent 20 hours in the company of Vladimir Putin. And now we are going to be talking about nuclear energy and its propensity to change the world, or at least the potential for it to change the world. His film is called Nuclear Now. And also, although he has forgotten it, he did once make a documentary with me. Please welcome to Stay Free with Russell Brand, Oliver Stone. Hello, Oliver. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Russell. Nice to see you again. You look great, by the way.
Thank you for starting with a compliment, and I'd like to begin our exchange for apologising for my broad conduct during a time when we made a documentary. If you remember anything about it at all, it will be the moment that I had to write a letter of apology to Donald Trump after I met him, which you organised, because I think you were working with him because of Wall Street 2, and I did an interview with Donald, and then subsequently made a bunch of jokes with him when I was doing stand-up, and it led to a whole furore. It was a long time ago, but nevertheless, I apologise. I see it hasn't impeded your ability to make other documentaries, and thank you for agreeing to come on our show.
Well, it's a pleasure. I don't remember it that way. I remember you as being very exciting and vital, and it was fun. Of course, you know, I know a lot of loonies in this business, and we do, you know, so you didn't stand out particularly as a madman, but I see you've got to be what you are. It's a genuine article.
Oh, thank you, Oliver. That's fantastic. Before we talk about things like censorship and Oliver Snowden, and before we delve into JFK and RFK, I'd love to talk to you about your film Nuclear Now. Obviously, this has always been a controversial subject. The connotations of Chernobyl, the broad fear around nuclear power is as prevalent now as it always has been. Is that why you've chosen to make this documentary?
Well, you asked a lot of questions. The big picture for me was climate change, and you can't ignore it, especially since Al Gore's film An Inconvenient Truth in 2006 made me very aware of it. And of course, his solution in that film was renewables, which were essentially sun, solar, and hydro. But 14 years have gone by, 15, 16 years have gone by, and the IPCC has just said that the carbon CO2 in the world and the methane gas just keeps climbing up. So it hasn't been solved. We're going worse and getting hotter and hotter and hotter, as you can see from the heat wave around us. I just got back from Europe, and boy, was it hot in the southern part of Europe, very hot. And I just don't see it getting any better. And the world is going to get worse, and in the sense of quality-wise, and my children, your children, grandchildren, it's going to be a mess. And I think there's going to be more tension and more dissatisfaction, unhappiness, wars, revolution, and so forth and so on. So we have to do something, Russell. This is the most important issue I think we have in the world, beyond anything else, beyond wars, beyond, well, we'll talk about wars later, but this is really crucial. So scared out of my mind, I started to read more about it. And I came across this book, A Bright Future by Josh Goldstein and Stefan Skavist, who's a Swedish nuclear scientist. In that short book, they lay out a very common sense plan saying that, look, go back and think about nuclear energy. You've completely misjudged it. You've completely mischaracterized it. It is not what you think it is, and it is the miracle that it originally was when Marie Curie found it in 1895. Albert Einstein endorsed it by saying it will change everything in this world. It will unleash new powers we don't even know of, except our way of thinking. That's what he said. It was a very interesting comment. And it turns out to be true. Nuclear energy was confounded from the moment it started in World War II, when we became aware of it with a bomb at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which was an ill usage of the bomb, as you know. Well, we don't want to talk about that history, but it was badly used. And it scared the shit out of the whole world. It scared the shit out of everybody, and it really dominated our dialogue and the Cold War for many, many years. But the truth is that nuclear energy for civilian purposes is completely the opposite. It is not enriched uranium. It is low-level uranium, which is what is processed. To make a bomb is very difficult. It requires 80-90% enrichment. That's why you see all these test tubes and you see all the Iranians going crazy. And here in the civilian world, we don't have that problem. But people think it's going to blow up. They think that a low enriched uranium is dangerous. It is only when it explodes, and even then, as we saw in Chernobyl, it is limited in its damage. We explored the Chernobyl phenomenon in the film. And, 50 first responders died there. After that, there was a leak that went over Northern Europe because there was no containment structure in the Chernobyl reactor, which has, of course, been corrected. There's now all the reactors have containment structures, but that didn't. And it leaked into Northern Europe all over the place. And they still, after all those years, the UN went back and back and back, and the World Health Organization went back, and they could only find that possibly 4,000 people died from cancers after the fact. Even that has been in question, and some estimates are lower. So the dangers of radioactivity have been very exaggerated over time. And when you get into it, and we do in the film, I hope you see it, it's really important to understand that low-level radiation is a part of the world. We have radiation in our bodies. We have the ability to fix it. We have DNA discovered by Crick and Watson and proven that it repairs our body tissues. It repairs damage to our bodies as we go. We have a double helix. It's, get into all that if you want, but essentially we are not in danger from radiation any more than other things like the other, let's call it oil, gas, and arsenics, poisons, toxic waste from oil. We release it into the universe. It just throws, and it's part of the problem that we have with the pollution that we have. The waste from radioactivity is closely monitored in caskets and underwater in caskets, and it's kept there for years. And after that, if necessary, it's buried deep in the earth. It's nothing compared to what chemical and oil and coal waste is. Nothing compared to it.
I see that your advocacy is founded on the best conceivable principles, addressing a problem that elsewise seems almost impossible to alter. Throughout your career, Oliver, you have presumably intuitively understood stories that have been necessary to tell, stories of high-level corruption, stories of needless war, geopolitical conflicts reported erroneously, simultaneous historical narratives left untold because they contain, indeed, to cite the title of Al Gore's film, inconvenient truths. With the subject of this film, my concern, and like I'm watching the chat now, like people are watching this in our locals community, a lot of people have a strong aversion to nuclear power. Perhaps it's because of the reasons that you're addressing, that they understandably associate nuclear energy with nuclear destruction and the notable disasters that you've already cited, in addition to the militaristic use of nuclear weapons. But the point I'd like to take you up on is a slightly different one. If we don't address our attitude towards consuming, then I feel that we are going to sustain significant problems. Oughtn't we be looking to alter the manner in which we live rather than looking for methods to sustain what appears to be, by its nature, unsustainable?
Good point, but I don't agree with you. I don't think it's going to be possible to change human nature. I think if you go to the poorer countries in the world, you see a stark example of it. India, of course, they're going to look for electricity. They want electricity for their tools in order to cut sugarcane. It's just natural that people who are poor are going to want easier ways to do things. And this is true about China, Indonesia, all these populous countries that are coming into heavier usage of electricity. And not only that, cars, transportation with that, which is not electricity, and industries that don't which have not been electrified yet, such as cement making in all countries. They're going to make cement. They're going to continue to have agriculture and fertilizer, and they're going to be demand for steel. I mean, it's natural. So you're not going to stop the demand, and that's consumption. Now, I know the Greta Thunbergs of the world believe that we should all punish ourselves, but I don't think that's going to happen. So that's why nuclear power, which is infinite in its power, millions and millions of times more powerful than coal or oil. It's just a miracle, actually, that it was found, but we misused it as we do. Let's say you have a knife. Of course, you can misuse a knife to kill people. That happens all the time. Guns, this, that, everything has been misused by human beings. But to go to the some biblical equation of Abel and Cain, let's say, and say everyone's going to misuse is not valid, because most people will use things well, will use things for positive reasons. It's just human nature to want things.
Wanting, it does appear to be part of human nature, but there is no question that human nature responds to the systems within which we exist. And certainly I welcome a conversation that is about systemic and resource change rather than measures that are continually punitive to the individual, 15-minute cities, for example, or impeding people's ability to, inverted commas, progress in nations such as you have already listed. I recognize that that's an important story to tell, an important conversation to have. But what I sense is, God, we're all going to have different approaches to these matters, but my personal approach is, how do we start to address the fact that we're living in a deeply corrupt, deeply hypocritical, deeply war-torn society currently? And I suppose another advantage that your film presents to us is the ability to abate and prevent these resource wars. There's no doubt that the Ukraine-Russia conflict has a component that is to do with territory as well as resources. The so-called Middle Eastern wars are all undergirded by a necessity for fuels, as you've already listed. And your position on war, and indeed the reporting on war, has significantly shifted many people's perspectives on it. Oliver, would you talk to us a little about the current Ukraine-Russia conflict, and indeed how energy has often been the driving factor behind military conflicts of a global scale?
Yeah. First, I just want to say one quick rejoinder to what you were thinking about consumption. I just want to say the fact is that electricity, the need for electricity is going to grow and grow until the IPCC gives 2050 as an endpoint, saying that from there on there'll be a tipping point and so forth and so on. The Earth will not be able to recover. Be that as it may, by 2050, any realistic estimate of the use of electricity will go up from 2 times to 4 times more electricity will be required. Some people even say 5. That's Russell, you have no idea how many gigawatts, terawatts that means in the world. That is just going to be, it's going to be an overload completely. We don't have it. We don't have the grid structure, and we don't have the generators in place. It's just going to be worse and worse and worse. So it's a real problem unless you face those statistics. As to war, what a tragedy. It's a huge waste of human resources, as we all agree about wars. It's like watching World War I all over again, and you see the waste and the death and the destruction. You have to. War is not good, but you have to look at the reasons for this war. And whenever you do, the Americans like to simplify and say it's a question of a Russian invasion of Ukraine. That's very simplistic and very black and white. And I think you know the story behind it. I made a film back in 2017, 16 called I produced it. I didn't direct it. Ukraine on Fire, which explained the origins of this war in the coup d'état of 2014, which was sponsored and supported thoroughly by the United States. It was a very deep plan to penetrate the to penetrate the Russian Federation. From the beginning, the neoconservative movement, who started the war in Iraq, going back to the 1990s, they've been at war with Russia, these people, and they're deep inside our government and the State Department. Victoria Nuland, you know these names, Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, Anthony Blinken, Secretary of State, they seem to have control. Biden is an old Cold Warrior, and he really hates the old Soviet Union, which he confounds again with the Russian Federation, which is not communist. I really bemoan this because I say this because Russia and China, which are our two leading enemies now, a few years ago, were our allies or friends, potential friends, and we blew the opportunity, and we still can make that opportunity work because Russia is the leading producer of nuclear energy in the world. They've done the most advanced work. Why? Because recently, but in the 1940s, they started to develop civilian energy, and they've been doing it steadily. And now they have Rosatom. Rosatom is a state agency with 250,000 employees who know everything to know about nuclear energy. They do every department, and they export their generators to all these new countries, Bangladesh, to India, to Turkey, to Belarus, to the Middle Eurasia. I mean, they're the biggest sellers of it, and they deliver turnkey factories. Turnkey, which is the essence to this thing, how to build nuclear reactors fast on an assembly line like airliners. This is what has to be done. And they're really our potential allies. They are not our enemies. And I've been saying this. I made the film on Putin. You saw it, I hope. You know, I asked him very honest questions, and he answered. And I didn't sense the belligerence. He kept calling the United States his partners, if you remember in the film, my American partners. Okay, he may have been a little soft on his perception of the United States, but he is not the monster that has been pictured by the American propaganda machine. So this is an unfortunate tragedy, as is China, because we alienated them too. They are also coming up very strongly in nuclear energy. They started late, but most recently they've announced a program. $500 billion, $440 billion are going into an investment of making 130 some new nuclear reactors. And they're by 2038, that's almost 10 a year. Okay, 10 a year by 2038. And President Xi has committed himself to a zero growth policy on carbon dioxide by 2060. These are big, significant statements, and they're important that we try to let them honor them. But by competing with them instead of cooperating with them, we're making things far worse.
But with the kind of reductive reporting that surrounds subjects like the war, and when you made your film with Putin, you were called a Putin apologist. You remember, I'm sure, the reaction from the audience when you spoke to Stephen Colbert about Putin, like that the audience are just not willing to listen to nuanced information. Throughout your career, you've been iconoclastic, and you've been willing to tell difficult stories about war, about corruption, indeed, including the assassination of JFK, of course. So why do you remain confident that you can make an impact on a subject like, like with your film Nuclear Now? Because if there isn't an appetite to monetize this form of energy currently, if the old model is still one that's being sustained through forever wars and the types of relationships that surround them, how likely is it that popularizing these ideas with the public is the route to success with these methods? You faced, I remember at the time of JFK, you faced a lot of cynicism, skepticism, and outrage with the Putin films, with the films around Cuba, with your alternative history to America. What impact do you believe that you can have when there is a media that works so hard to curtail alternative narratives and to enforce and continually impose accepted wisdom, albeit warped wisdom?